How many of you in this room use words online? How many use Facebook, Twitter, have a blog, right? Most of us have our hands up, right? We are all writers now, all of us. And in many ways, this is a fabulous thing. We're hearing points of view we didn't hear in the past. It's wildly democratic and creative. As someone who was born before the internet, I still love that I can pick myself up on a Thursday afternoon by Googling puns and being entertained by the brilliance of strangers. But it's also true that we're immeasurably cruel to one another online. We mock each other, we call each other names, we're coarse, we're uncivil, and we're often dehumanizing. In many ways, this is understandable. I think it's really easy to forget when we're publishing our words online, that there are human beings on the other end of those words. But we can't, because our words matter. The ones we choose matter. We have so much power with the words we choose. We can make people feel things strongly. We can spur others to action. A word can feel like a punch in the face, or it can lift somebody out of depression. With this power, to quote the great writer Peter Parker's Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm here today to share a little bit of my story with the hopes of convincing you all that we are all co-authors of our culture, and that the culture we tolerate online right now is one that we do not need to tolerate. We have the power to change it. It'll take taking our words seriously. So my story starts 20 years ago. I was in a creative writing program studying fiction as a graduate student, and the ethos of the program was tough love. The problem was that there was no love, none, and that the toughness often felt like the internet feels today, mocking, disdainful, and condescending. I barely survived. And so when I graduated, I felt passionate about trying to teach creative writing differently. I wanted to stick with tough love, actually, but I wanted tough to be honest, rigorous feedback, and I wanted there to be a whole lot more love and support and cheerleaderliness among the group. So I put $400 on my credit card, which was a lot of money for me back then, and I created this flyer that I thought looked really professional at the time, although it has not aged that well. And I got on my bike, and I drove up and down Beacon Street, right here in Brookline, advertising 2 workshops under the name of Grub Street. To my complete joy, surprise, and slight panic, 8 brave souls took me up on this, and Grub Street was born. The first classes were taught by me and a friend, and we had really thin credentials. We had no institutional backing, and our students were completely unvetted. There was no admission standards. So in many ways, we were just like the internet is today. We were democratic and open, and it was not hierarchical at all. So in many ways, we were an experiment with what happens when strangers come together and take each other's words seriously in this culture of rigor and love. So what happened? Well, I'm very proud to report that 20 years later, and almost 30,000 students later, thanks to the incredible talent and hard work of so many local authors, Grub Street has grown into the largest nonprofit creative writing center in the country. Woo, thank you. Along the way, many in our community have had tremendous literary success. But another thing has happened, which is relevant to what I want to talk about today, and it's this. We have created an incredibly connected, understanding, and kind community. And it has everything to do, everything, with how we communicate with one another and what happens in our classrooms. On one level, what happens in our classrooms is very simple. Strangers come together, they come in with drafts of novels, op-eds, memoirs, and they share them with people they wouldn't meet in any other setting, people that come from different backgrounds and income brackets and age groups. And they tell these other people what they're trying to accomplish. And then the strangers in the room treat them with respect, take their words seriously, and start to help them edit their work. To the novelist, they might say, the setting's working really well, but these characters are still pretty flat. You need to dig harder. to figure out what that person's really going through, to round that out. To the person who's writing the op-ed, they might say, that's a really interesting point of view, but you haven't worked hard enough yet. So you need to go out and get more evidence, or your logic's a little funky. And in this way, in this back and forth, the writer learns a tremendous amount about themselves and what they're trying to say. They learn from the perspectives of everybody else in the room, and they get better. Their writing gets better. And often students will report to me that they were able, by working in the company of strangers in a community, to produce work they never would have been able to think possible. They produced something that they thought was beyond their capacity. What I see in the classrooms really makes me wonder about what we're squandering online today when we have this opportunity to communicate human to human for the first time. And what would it be like if we could actually make the online experience a little bit more like a really well-run writing workshop and a little bit less like a Game of Thrones episode? What would that take? It's deceptively simple. I think it would take rigor and love. It would take everybody owning the fact that we are all now co-creators and co-writers of this culture we share online. And it would take us holding ourselves and other people to very high standards when we publish our words online. We would also use this to help us figure out how to communicate with others online. So, if you're writing online, you would say to yourself, I want to make sure that every word I publish online is as accurate, honest, and truthful as I can muster. And it's also written with an intention of being loving and kind to other human beings. Here's a few things that might change online if we could all do this. These words, except in times of humor, would disappear because we'd know immediately that the author wasn't being rigorous. They're cliche, they're flat, they're not telling us anything new, and they're also not loving. We know immediately that nobody has any intention of learning anything from the other side when they're using these words. Statements like all immigrants or all rural voters would also go away because all statements are never true, and that just wouldn't be a rigorous thing to say. It's not even true that all Boston drivers are bad drivers. It only feels that way. We would also not share any words or any op-eds or essays that didn't hold up to these standards. So we wouldn't share articles that weren't sourced or accurate, that weren't written with the intention to understand the world and not to tear it down. We wouldn't share those terrible articles that make people's blood pressure spike because they have really alarming headlines that have nothing to do with the content of the article. We wouldn't do that. But perhaps most importantly, we would stop doing this. We would stop talking to each other this way, calling each other names and insulting each other online. This took me 3 minutes to put together this slide. This is what we're all reading and getting used to online. To my mind, there is no good reason to insult another human being online ever. And this includes public officials, celebrities. They're human beings as well. We need to stop this. Instead, we should do what we do in the classrooms, which is we look at the words and not the person. When we respond to somebody in the classroom, we have this expression, keep it on the page. And we interrogate and ask people in a rigorous, loving way what they're trying to express. And we assume that their intentions are good. We assume that their motivations are good, and we start to ask them questions. We can be very rigorous with one another if we make the right approach. The other thing is we can have fun with this. The other day I was reading an article, or I was reading a post from a friend, and I thought her language or her logic looked a little strange, but I couldn't remember exactly why. I couldn't remember the logic from my sophomore logic class in college. And I was thinking it would be great if we could enlist those philosophy nerds to help remind us of the best arguments we could be using and when we were falling into using bad language. And they could create emojis. They could let us know if we were using a straw man argument or a red herring or a slippery slope. So imagine what our experience online would change if we could pull this off together. Now, you might think this sounds Pollyanna-ish, but I think we can do it. We have changed our culture before. In the 70s, we decided to stop littering, and there was a massive public PSA campaign, and we largely stopped littering. Sure, there are a couple of litterers still, and there will always be trolls, but by and large, it's insulting to us when we see someone litter. As the co-authors of our culture, we can decide now. We are writing this story. We're in control of the plot line. We can say that calling someone ugly or moronic online, making a claim about all immigrants, or sharing an article with your peers online that you haven't bothered to read, we can make that as offensive as rolling down your window and heaving a bag of trash onto the side of the road. We can do that. And from my experience at Grub Street, I can only imagine the brilliance, the creative ideas, the innovation, the insight that we could help unlock in one another if we were communicating properly online, if we're using this historic opportunity to connect human to human as a way to connect instead of shout each other down. So I'm going to leave you with this. I hope that the next time you get online, whether it's in 5 minutes, tonight, or in the morning, that you consider taking these words and putting them somewhere close to your computer, making them the wallpaper on your iPhone, and thinking of yourself as a writer, holding that responsibility, and imagining that everybody else in your community online is also a writer, and that we're all showing up with really messy first drafts, and that we have the capacity with rigor and love to help each other sort it out. Thank you.